we are mildly interesting guys, and we talk about some stuff. So welcome to the podcast, we call it Joel the Podcast. It's Alex and it's Alex, here for Joel the Podcast. Bzzz. Hello everybody, I'm Alex.
And I'm Alex.
And this is our podcast, Joel. Welcome to episode 79 of Joel the Podcast. Being recorded on Groundhog Day 2021.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. And sadly, we will be seeing 6 more weeks of winter this year.
Uh-huh. Does that mean that the groundhog saw its shadow? Is it still like a real thing that they do?
I assume.
You know,
I've never actually watched it.
Oh. I assumed based on you having that knowledge that you were familiar with.
I always make sure to find out what the result is, but that's about it.
Huh.
So
interesting. Well, I was gonna ask you some questions about the groundhog, but
just ask me the questions anyway. Just ask me the questions anyway, and I'll make up the answers.
Okay. Is it still the same groundhog? Have they been using one groundhog all along?
It's actually a different groundhog every year, and there's a big lottery where people enter their pet groundhogs to try and be, the groundhog coming out of the hole.
That's pretty cool. So I know there's I know there's a way that they do it, but actually I have no idea how they do it. I only assume that they have some kind of general procedure, but do they just kind of wait around and watch the groundhog all day until it does something?
No, so what happens is, it's not like they just wait for the groundhog to come out and then check whether he's seen. They actually take the groundhog out of his box that he's in.
Oh, okay.
And then they just set him down and see what he does, whether he looks at his shadow and goes back in the box or whether he stays out, so...
Yeah, well, so that's the other thing I'm interested in is, how do they know that he's looked at his shadow as opposed to... almost certainly he's going to turn in multiple directions, right?
Right.
Is there a certain point at which you can determine that he's seen his shadow or not?
They ask him. They, pick him up, hold it up to their ear and say, "Did you see your shadow?" And then they make up whatever they want.
All right, well...
At least that's what happened in the movie Groundhog Day.
Okay.
And that's a real answer that happened in the movie Groundhog Day.
Right. Okay, well that satisfies my curiosity. I can't imagine wanting to know anything else about the groundhog or Groundhog Day in general.
Yes. Also, go watch Groundhog Day. It's a good movie. All right.
Yeah. Is it on Netflix? This is more for my knowledge than the listeners.
I don't think so.
Okay, well that's a shame. If any of our listeners would like to email us a movie file of Groundhog Day, or rather a link to a place where I can watch the movie, since I assume you can't send us an entire movie via email.
Right. And where can they find our email?
Cut it up into multiple different clips and send us lots of emails. That would almost be more fun, because then we'd get a lot of emails.
Indeed, but then we would have to watch the movie as a bunch of annoying separate clips. Probably aren't more than a few minutes long.
No, and getting those in order might be a little bit tricky. So ultimately, it's up to you, the viewer, how you would like to email us. All I know for sure is that you will email us, because you can find our email conveniently located at our website, alexandalex@joelthepodcast.github.io/alexandalex@joelthepodcast.website. I started to say it, and I was so focused on doing the clever pause thing that I freaked myself out on the inside a little bit that I wasn't going to be able to remember what the actual address is.
Right.
I got through Alex and Alex, and I was like, what's next? Oh no. This is all happening on the inside. Clearly it was pretty seamless.
Right, but, you did it flawlessly on the outside, so...
Yeah, so just letting you all know that, as perfect as we may appear, We are perfect. We just have internal doubts sometimes.
Yes.
Just like you.
Right. Okay, so I wanted to start off here by letting everyone know that Nathan does not owe me $1.
And for the first time in a little while, Alex does not owe me $1. He has paid me for his inaugural address bet. Saw that the other day, and I was a little bit sad that I will no longer be able to say that he owes me $1, but
we're going to make another bet today.
Bet.
Yeah, exactly.
So
maybe I'll win one this time.
Yeah, that would be a nice change of pace. I can't remember any bets that you've won.
Right. So, I mean, obviously I have won some bets. I've just lost most of the recent bets. I won the first bet, so...
That's probably debatable. I think our audience would agree that it's debatable.
I think our audience would agree that it's been resolved.
I think some independent arbiters may also agree that it's debatable, but you know.
I don't think so. All right, let's go on to our sports minute. So we're gonna do our sports minute again this week, since nobody told us they didn't like it.
We didn't get emails one way or another, so you know the jury is still out on whether or not we should be doing a sports minute. Hopefully, we're not doing you a disservice by only talking about sports for 1 minute.
Right, and we're gonna make sure we try and keep up as much as possible talking about the sports minute for more than 1 minute, just to keep up the.
It's really, I mean, it's genuinely really important that the intro to the podcast, I think at least, is very substantive, so that takes some of the pressure off of our later bits of the episode. They don't have to be as good.
Right. We kind of carry ourselves in the first 10 minutes so that we can just kind of shoot the shit for the other 50 minutes.
I assume after the first 10 minutes, if you're still listening, you're guaranteed to listen till the end. You're not going to get to like minute 42 and be like, all right, that's enough of this.
You know what? That's the tipping point. 42 minutes. I was in it up until here, but now this is just too much.
I was deeply engaged, but no longer.
Yes.
Anyway,
right,
that was a pretty good sports minute introduction. Are we ready for the actual minute to begin?
Got the timer set up right here, and go. Purdue finally ranked this week number 24 by the AP poll after winning on Saturday against Minnesota, and promptly loses to Maryland tonight at Maryland.
Yeah, well, by 1 point though, and on the road, so to some people that could be considered a win, but to the authoritative body of college basketball, it won't be, unfortunately.
Indeed. And the other sports news this week is the Super Bowl is occurring this Sunday between the two quarterbacks who won the two previous Super Bowls. So a lot of parity in the NFL, as we can see.
At least one of them switched teams.
Yes. So we'll be tuned into that, and we'll be sure to bring you all the commentary from that next week on our podcast. And that is the end of the sports minute. So, not a lot of sports this week. But we did want to take a minute to actually do some predictions about the Super Bowl outside of the sports minute, so we can actually talk about it for a minute. So, if you do not like that, tough. Here it is. So, what's your prediction for the Super Bowl?
Okay. Well, so this is kind of tough. I think that obviously, first of all, let me say that I have absolutely no experience with the NFL this year. I haven't watched a single game.
Right.
And I just have some vague knowledge of the teams.
Yes.
But that being said, I think, kind of from top to bottom, if I had to pick one, I would say Kansas City is the better team.
Right.
And obviously it's going. I personally think it's going to be a close game. I don't think we're going to get. I think it's also going to be kind of a mid to low scoring game as well. So I don't know if, like I said, I haven't watched any of it, so I don't know if I have any more interesting commentary than that. But my actual prediction, if I had to give numbers, I'm going to say...
Right, and before you make this prediction, just to clarify, this is before the game. We have not seen the game.
Oh, I mean, obviously. Like we said, today is Groundhog Day.
Last year, some people accused us of... Well, no one really did, but we thought some people might accuse us of putting in our predictions after the game.
Yeah.
So let's hear your prediction with that in mind.
Right. Yeah. Keeping in mind that this is definitely a prediction being made today, February 2nd, 2021. Right. 5 days before the Super Bowl, or maybe 6. Is it
5 days
6?
is correct.
5?
5 days is correct.
Cool. Here it is. Here's my prediction. Buccaneers 27, Chiefs 24.
All right, nice prediction. I would say, for me, this game is going to be great because really, you have the Chiefs who have looked pretty much unstoppable all year versus Tom Brady in the playoffs, who was eternally unstoppable, and has shown no signs of slowing down in his, 100th season or whatever this is.
Yeah.
And I think it's tough, but I gotta go with Brady in a shootout. Buccaneers 37, Chiefs 34.
All right, interesting predictions. I think honestly, either one of those could totally be the score, and I would not be surprised at all. So
yeah, I agree, and so good luck to both teams, and we'll be rooting for one of you or not. Okay, so that is the end of sports. Let's talk about GameStop.
Oh man, this has got to be the hottest topic we have ever covered on this podcast.
If you have been living under a rock, you may not have heard, and I guess by the time this comes out, this will be old news.
Yeah.
But some Redditors on r/Wall Street Bets took notice that some hedge funds had been shorting GameStop stock, meaning that they were betting against it to lose, to go down. And eventually, I think they were hoping GameStop would go bankrupt. And they would make a lot of money.
Let me get ahead of all of this discussion, by the way, and say that we are not financial experts and this is not financial advice.
We're not lawyers and this isn't legal advice, but I would say that... So what these Redditors decided to do is to execute a short squeeze, which, without going into too much detail, basically means they bought all of the GameStop stock that they could get their hands on, and not sell it. And so the hedge funds who would short it would be required to buy back the stocks at exorbitantly high prices.
Right.
And so the stock did shoot up quite significantly last week and has since come down somewhat significantly. But the squeeze is still on, according to Wall Street Bets, and so we'll see.
According to everyone who has thousands of dollars invested in the hope that it goes back up.
Right, that's the thing. I really don't know enough about this stuff to know whether these people are correct or not.
Yeah.
Like, what they say makes sense to me, but also I wouldn't be amazed if the stock just never went up.
I have no finance literacy. I've actually learned quite a bit, not from Wall Street Bets, but reading terms and then independently looking them up, because I was I have no idea what any of this means.
Right.
So yeah, I'm in the same kind of boat as you of what they're saying makes sense, but then I remember that these are just a bunch of random Redditors. Who knows if they have any credibility whatsoever? So
we'll see. But as in the spirit of this podcast, we're going to make a bet, as is only appropriate for this occasion.
Right.
So last week, GameStop hit over $400 a share. It's down to $90 a share at close today. It was $20 a share earlier this month. So let's make two predictions. The bet will be this: what is the highest amount GameStop stock will reach over the next month?
Right.
And just as a prediction, I guess there's no prediction. Oh, no, the prediction would be if the squeeze happens, when will it happen? I guess we don't really have any idea about that, so let's not predict that. Let's just make the bet. What is the highest price game?
What's the highest value?
Highest price.
All right.
Go.
Oh,
and whoever's
boy.
closest wins. Doesn't matter if you go over.
Doesn't matter if you go over. All right. So here's the thing. It's been very trendy. It seems like we've both been following this to about the same degree, which is
okay, right.
Fairly closely, but
let me just stop you real quick.
Through Reddit.
Let's write down our bets first, so that we can't influence each other, and then you can go through all of your explanation and say what your bet was.
That's a good idea. So I'm gonna.
So can overwrite the bets we made for the inauguration speech length.
Let's see.
Because, if it doesn't go back up, then 90 will probably be the highest. It'll just keep going down. But if it does, who knows how high it could go?
Exclusively through the next month, right? So from February 2nd.
By March 2nd, what's the highest? Until
what's
March 2nd?
The highest value it will have reached?
Right. So this does not include what it has previously reached in January, right? This only includes over the next month.
So if I think it's going to go down, I would say, 90-ish. If I thought it was going to spike back up somehow, I'm thinking, what's it going to spike to? Man, this is a really tough question.
Right. Okay. I'm putting in mine. All right. So I've got mine in there. And I guess I'll talk while you're making your prediction. So
okay, yeah, go ahead and talk through your logic. I've made my prediction as well.
So this short squeeze strategy was previously executed in 2008 on Volkswagen stock.
Right.
And it actually looked a little bit kind of similar to what we've seen with GameStop. The price went up to about went from like $200 all the way up to $400, and then when the squeeze happened, hit somewhere in the 900s. For a brief period.
Right.
So I'm predicting a similar event. I said GME 967.
All right. That is sound logic as far as I know. I do like the Volkswagen comparison. Just for the sake of interest, because I know if I were to, guess along those same lines, I would come up with a very similar number, and I don't think it would be that interesting. So what I decided I would do is think fairly pessimistically in that we've seen definitely a peak in price, and it's coming down hard right now.
Right.
I think a lot of the excitement and the buzz was around the fact that it had been like incredibly low. I think you said like $20 a month ago or something like that. And it made it all the way up to like over 400 or whatever it was. And I think that got a lot of people hyped and like ready to buy in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they did that at the point where it was fairly high, like $300 to $400, and now it's gone down. I think that's going to scare off a lot of the people who were in it for the hype, and the hype kind of pushed it up. So I'm thinking we might see some leveling out. We might see it go back up, but I think it's only really going to ever make it back to about 250. That is my slightly more pessimistic prediction. I would absolutely love to be proved wrong, though.
Right.
It would be hilarious if this thing just absolutely took off, made it through the roof. And we did briefly touch on this beforehand, but with prices crashing down fairly low right now, I would say personally in the next couple of days, if GameStop reaches $50 a share, I would buy one, and then see what happens. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are go hard or go home.
Yeah?
Right? Like, I don't spend a lot of money. Especially since I'm living at my parents' house right now.
I feel like you might be about to flex on all of us really hard
I'm
right
not
now
gonna
and
say
drop
what amount of money
$10,000 on GameStop.
I'm not gonna spend $10,000 on GameStop, but I think I could safely lose $1,000. I
Yeah.
think I could safely spend $1,000 on GameStop stock and not feel that bad if it just went to zero and I lost all of that money.
And I mean, think about it, right? If you put in $1,000 into the stock and it hits it at like 100 or so, like it is now, and it hits 900, like you said, that's like $9,000.
Yep.
That's a huge profit. That's incredible. That's insane.
Right. And the thing is, I'm kind of on the fence about whether to do it.
Yeah.
Because like I said before, I don't really know what I'm talking about with this stuff. It's just that a bunch of people on the internet's logic seems to make sense.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of on the fence. If it drops to 50 though, that might be, I don't know, but that might mean it's not going back up. So I don't know.
Is it too good to pass up at that point, or has it completely imploded?
I'm really going to be kicking myself because a lot of people on Reddit seem to think that 1,000 is like the floor of the price and that it will go to like 5,000.
Yeah.
I'll be kicking myself if I could have bought 200 shares for $1,000 and that would have been worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and I just didn't do it.
That's a really tough thing to know that what could have been. You were definitely in a position to pull the trigger, but you just didn't know. So I mean, that's why I'm saying $50, because I would absolutely just throw away $50, no questions asked. I have no, I am not concerned even a little. Like $1,000, I would be upset if I lost $1,000, but if I lost $50, man,
I get what you're saying. Like $1,000 is not like I would be willing to just throw it away. Like what I'm saying is, it's not like it wouldn't really be a huge deal for me financially speaking if I lost it. It would just be like a huge waste of $1,000.
It wouldn't be like, a destructive decision to bet $1,000
exactly.
on it.
So
but
it's really something I would only do if I actually looked into this and said, okay, is somebody other than Reddit saying that this is a good strategy? Is there really a chance that this price could skyrocket? And I really think in the end I probably won't buy any, but that's just where my head is at. So
yeah, it's really interesting to watch unfold. I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Right.
So that being said, we've almost certainly spent like 10 minutes now talking about GameStop stock. So
we're almost at the exact same XFL mark. Skip to 2247 if you don't care about GameStop stock.
If you don't care about GameStop stock, stop listening to the podcast. How dare you?
I feel like there's a really good tongue twister that can be made out of this. All right.
GameStop stock?
Yeah, let's hear the email we received this week.
All right, we did get an email. This went from a very concerning email when I read the subject line to probably one of the funniest emails we've received in a while. So here we go. The subject of this email is, "This podcast is dumbass."
Uh-oh.
Right? That was my first impression
I'm
too.
concerned.
But here we go. Here we go. Strap in. So this of course this email comes to us from Cephalopodmaster.
Of course.
He says, "Hi Alex and Alex at Joel the Podcast. I was trying to listen to episode 4 of your podcasts, and YouTube's search result returned this clickbait video on the top of the recommendation, and I, being a dumbass, foolishly fell for the trap. I am outraged by this surreptitious attempt to ride off of your popularity. Please see the attachment." And I'm just gonna rotate my camera around to the screen. He sent us a screen clip of Joel's Afro podcast, episode 4, by someone who is actually named Joel.
Right.
The thumbnail here, if I had to describe this, I would say it's what looks to be a 6-headed dragon with or maybe it's only got 5 heads. It's hard to say. It's kind of cut out of the frame.
It's
but
a multi-headed dragon with
multi-headed
teenage
dragon
boys'
with
heads pasted on the heads.
Exactly. So, first of all, I have some questions about why you thought this was our podcast, because that's definitely not what our thumbnail looks like.
Well, he explained it already. He said it's because he's a dumbass. So I accept that explanation.
Okay.
My question
fair.
is, why is this called Joel's Afro Podcast when I don't think any of the people in that thumbnail have an afro?
No, I would agree with that. Especially, it's not clear which one of these people is Joel. I'm assuming one of them is because of the channel name.
I was assuming Joel was like the guy with the biggest head there.
Yeah, that's my first thought as well, but who knows?
Who knows? Not like we're actually going to listen to it.
I was actually literally just about to say I'm kind of curious to listen to this.
Okay, well, that's fair, but if you do, then let me know which one is Joel.
All right. I mean, it might be hard to say because it's a podcast. Maybe they have some video component to their podcast.
Right.
Who knows? Well, I suppose David knows. David, if you listen to a significant portion of this podcast and would like to fill us in on whether or not it's worth listening to, you can of course send us an email. I just want to say that the thumbnail was clearly the best part of this screenshot, but it does also include kind of the beginning of the video description, which is episode 4 of the Joel's Afro podcast. I have to say that's not a very good name for a podcast, by the way.
Right.
This episode we have a special guest, Andy. We talk about guilty pleasures and answer ... So, I don't know.
If you're Joel of Joel's Afro Podcast, send us an email, which can be found at our website, alexandalex@joelthepodcast.github.io/alexandalex@joelthepodcast.website/index.html. And let us know.
I forgot index HTML earlier.
Let us know why you chose such a terrible podcast name. And this reminds me of an advice question we answered. I don't remember the name of the person asking, but they were talking about how they wanted to buy a car and name it something that their cousin or sister or family member named their child. Do you remember that advice?
I do, yeah.
So that comes to mind. So Joel, just, Joel of this podcast, keep an eye out, because you never know what's going to happen. All right.
If maybe we shouldn't say this, and
I'm not a lawyer, and this is not me threatening somebody, but
no. Okay. What I was gonna say, and we'll cut this if you think afterwards that there's a risk of something actually going wrong here, but like, what if our listeners all go to this podcast and like accuse them of stealing the Joel the Podcast name? Starting an inter-podcast feud, because it doesn't seem like these are like particularly famous people either.
All right, if you're a listener to this podcast, go over to Joel's Afro Podcast and don't accuse him of stealing the name. But what you should do is comment on all of his videos things that sound like compliments, but if you really think about them, they're actually not.
I feel like we should at least listen to an episode before passing judgment too harshly.
Let me qualify that by saying I am 100% joking, and you should not go be mean to this teenager. You should definitely not. Not unless anything. Just don't be mean to this teenager.
Right.
So that was a total joke.
Mean.
Go buy some GameStop stock instead.
Absolutely.
All right.
Pump up those prices,
this is financial
but
advice.
Not any higher than $2.50 so that I win the $1 bet.
Indeed. Okay, so is there any more to the email?
Nope. That is all the email. So thank you for that email. And I'm excited to begin this podcast feud with the other Joel the Podcast. Indeed.
All right. So I think that after 30 minutes, we can now start the podcast. So for all of our regular listeners, you know that we left off our musical with Greg falling in love with Jolene inside a chicken costume.
Right.
And we said the final song was him singing about that, and the friend whose name was Beth, I believe, singing about this situation being kind of sticky. And we said Jolene at the time was kind of realizing that Greg was falling in love with her, which I would like to amend to say that she doesn't realize that yet. She should just be singing about how how she needs to figure out a way to get Greg to, stop coming, or
stop. What?
Coming to the store.
Okay.
Sorry. So that was bad.
I didn't assume any sort of context there, so I was genuinely just confused, but...
Right. Okay, so... Right, so let's start Act 2. What happens at the beginning of Act 2?
Here we go. Alright, Act 2 opens with...
Actually,
Act 2 opens with a...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's lay out the overall arc of Act 2, since I don't know that we actually established what that would be last time.
Okay, fair enough. I think honestly we've reached a point in the musical that we kind of considered very close to the end, where everything is kind of like coming together and all the revelations have been made. But really, this is just the beginning of Act 2.
Right.
So, all right. The one thing I was going to say before I forget it, and then we'll, switch to big picture mode, is that Act 2 opens with a musical number, of course, heavily featuring Jolene. What?
Of course.
Of course? What?
No, I was thinking of something else. Go on.
Okay. All right.
I was thinking of Good Enough.
Oh. Oh, man. That's not going to make sense to anyone. All right.
Go on.
Except Joel, ironically.
Yeah, he's not going to be listening, though.
He's not going to listen. So, we've got another musical number. It's got to start off. I feel like it's got to be a kind of a high energy thing because it's the opening of the act and it's got to get you pulled back in.
Uh-huh.
But also the tone right now is basically just like, what is even happening?
Right.
So I think that Jolene isn't really in kind of a high energy place right now. So we've got to have her, obviously as the main character, kind of featuring in this piece. But I think all the energy has to come from Greg, which is going to be weird. It's kind of this duet between them where she understands both sides, but he's not getting it. In fact, he's trying to kind of hide from her what's going on.
I think it's actually not too hard to make her side of the song energetic, because we ended the last act with her saying, "What am I going to do to get this guy to, go back to being my normal girlfriend and not continually arriving at this store?" And I think the start of Act 2 can be her saying, "Here's my plan to get this guy away from me."
Okay, so we've got some...
she can be assertively laying out the
scheming.
plan, which is kind of an energetic thing.
Okay. So with that in mind, let's switch back to big picture then. So we're starting out, Jolene has a plan. She's kind of like, the intro is kind of this like, almost to just kind of remind you where we are, like, this is crazy, this is weird, but here's what we're going to do and everything's going to turn out okay.
Right. So what we need is, in addition to planning of how to get rid of Joel, or Greg rather, she also has to have a plan to resolve the overall situation, i.e. get another job.
Right. And I think at the beginning of this act, she can be very optimistic that she's like, okay, this is weird now, but like it was weird for 2 days, and I could just ditch this job and everything will go back to normal.
Yes, that's good. That's good.
So maybe we almost have a situation here where Beth is like we start off the act with the potential for an acting job coming up.
That's a good idea. And I like this dynamic because it means we can totally play the opposite for Greg, because his start of act is saying, how can anything ever go back to normal now that I'm in love with this chicken mascot?
Right.
So while she's singing things can go back to normal soon, he's saying things can never go back to normal.
Yes. That's a perfect act opener. That is straight up. Both of them are like excited about the potential and also kind of nervous about the potential, and there's a lot of energy there. I like it.
Right. Okay, so the overall arc, right? So what's her plan? Her plan is to get an audition and get another job, and in the meantime, she needs to just be basically rude to Joel, as rude as she can possibly be, right?
Right.
So
I assume without like openly risking her job, right? Because
right, she doesn't want to get fired and she doesn't want to reveal her identity. So, but outside of those two things, what can she do?
All right. So, essentially where we had her at the beginning was just kind of like mildly engaging, but like obviously not speaking to Joel. Right. I think at this point we need active like avoidance, like she will if he comes up to her to start a conversation, she's like actively moving away.
Right, or she could accidentally hit him with whatever sign she's holding.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's good.
She could... I mean, the thing is, there's not a lot she can do in terms of avoidance because she has to be out there, right? Like, she can't just leave, and she can't just hide because those things would both not go well for her job-wise.
I'm imagining, I mean, yeah, to the extent that she possibly could, I'm imagining like shuffling back and forth to the opposite sides of the storefront, right, which is really like 20 feet of sidewalk or something like that.
Right. Okay,
and
yeah.
He's just kind of like chasing around behind, and there's probably some kind of like emotional music from his side and
right. So that's good. I honestly think just in general, her being as rude as possible and trying to ignore him is her general strategy. I don't know that we need to be more specific than that.
Right.
But as we discussed last time, every single thing that she does is misinterpreted by Joel and makes him fall deeper and deeper in love with her.
Right.
So, okay, so that's her strategy and the audition. So Joel's, I guess, arc for this part is... right. So I was thinking... we should have some more hijinks-related things for her, whatever job she's trying to get. Like, whatever job she's trying to get, acting job, somehow then just ties back into the original plot. I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense, what I'm saying. Does that make any sense, what I'm saying? That doesn't make any sense.
Nope.
Like, the problem is, really, we only have one plot at this point, which is... Joel's in love with her, she's trying, and she's doesn't want to reveal to him that she's her.
Right.
We need a second plot to happen at the same time. But it's weird if the second plot is not related to the first plot. I guess I can't really explain it in a very clear way. Like, maybe the job that she's auditioning for is actually... This is probably too heavy-handed, but is actually Joel is the director, or the job that she's auditioning for, Joel's best friend is the director, or something that requires further hijinks to ensue. Then that and the chicken plot all culminate in Joel finding out about her having lost her previous job and being this chicken mascot.
Hmm. Okay, I think I'm sort of getting what you're getting at now, but I'm still not certain. So if I'm going off on the wrong track, just stop me. But so what we're looking for is kind of like a, this separate Jolene needs to find a job plot also has a related conflict in that she needs to hide the fact that the chicken mascot thing and losing her original job and such, like there needs to be stakes in that part of the search to hide from Greg as well. It
Right.
can't just be a separate thing that's also going on.
Right. Like, I mean, I guess. Like, okay, so let's pretend that there didn't have to be an additional thing. There does have to be some kind of conflict. So what's the conflict? Like, what possible conflicts could we have for her getting another job? Like it's really lame if we just show her going to an audition and then that's it.
And she's just rejected from the audition.
Yeah,
because...
either way, rejected or accepted, it's kind of lame.
Sure.
So, like, ideally, she goes and she does well, but something is awry. So she gets a call back, but she can't just go back normally because I don't know why. I can't think of a good conflict.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I get it. There's got to be, it's not. There's not enough material just in the fact that she can't get an audition, or she
Right.
can't get a role based on repeated auditions while she's, auditions on the side of the chicken mascot gig, basically.
Right.
So maybe, that's an interesting problem. I don't think it's show stopping if we just don't really have something there, but it does make it feel kind of hollow,
Uh-huh. The show, we really don't have enough plot to fill in an entire act without it, is kind of my thinking.
Right.
Okay, so
So
let
the
me just...
arc of this, big picture, the arc of this then is Jolene needs to overcome some obstacle to get out of the chicken suit job before Greg can end their relationship and then confess his love to the chicken.
Right. Ideally, the way this ends is she gets another job at the same time as she reveals to Joel that she's in this chicken costume, at the same time as Joel reveals to her that he's in love with the girl in the chicken costume and not her anymore. So these three plots all come together in a heartfelt scene.
Yeah.
And then they make up and they all live happily ever after.
So let me tell you how that happens.
Okay.
She's got her offer. She has landed a role. And she finds out based on essentially a phone call at the end of her shift while she is literally in the chicken costume.
Uh-huh.
And it's the end of her shift and she's done for the day, and Joel is coming by at the end of the day to see her as she gets off of work. But what he doesn't know is she is going to go inside the shop, take off the chicken mascot head and hand it to Snowy Woodson and be like, I quit, I'm done, see you later.
Right.
And so he bursts in the door and is starting a song about how he loves the chicken mascot girl as she is pulling off the chicken mascot head, and there's this moment of he's going for it and then he's like, wait a minute, what? And she turns around and is like, no, and Snowy Woodson's just kind of
there.
There.
Classic Snowy.
Classic Snowy. If there's one thing I know about Snowy Woodson, it's that he's there. So that's essentially how that goes down. So what do we do for an entire act to keep her from doing that right away and getting a role or not getting a role? Because it's not a very interesting act of a musical if she's just trying and failing over and over.
Right. So I mentioned before, I don't really think we ever talked about Joel's job, but I mentioned before, she auditions for a show that Joel is somehow involved in. What do you think about that? Is that too heavy-handed?
I mean, it's not terrible on its own, but I feel like we would have integrated that in some way into our previous material. That would have come up as in, like, he's working on a project, she's, if she gets fired from her thing, why doesn't she just hop in where she's got a pretty sure bet of, why wouldn't that just be the solution right away?
Well,
so
I
maybe...
would think that maybe he's not like the director or somebody high up who can just get her a part, but he is involved somehow such that, like, he's the piano player. So, so when she shows up for the audition, she can't just go out there and sing. She has to somehow disguise herself and give a fake name, and she does really well, but she's like, okay, but I can't just show up next time with this fake name and disguise. Yeah. Otherwise, when I get the part, it'll be awkward when I'm like, surprise. So she's conflicted about what to do there. But that's just an example. The other idea is to just have a normal first rehearsal or first audition, and then offhand somebody says, like, oh man, can't wait for Joel to see this, Greg to see this girl, he'll be really impressed. And she's like, what? And they're like, oh yeah, Greg, he's our costume designer or something. And she's like, oh crap, I can't come back for this the callback, otherwise Greg will know it's me. So something like that was my idea, not where it's not like he could just get her apart.
Okay. That makes sense. I'm not like...
Or, actually, this is super heavy-handed. Greg is auditioning for, like, the love interest of her, the part that she's auditioning for. And so she doesn't see him in her first audition, but, like, the callbacks where they're doing, like, testing, she would run into him.
Alright, I do like that version of this better. I want to spend maybe like 2 more minutes trying to think about a different angle, but if we can't come up with it, that's the way we go, I think.
Okay, so what other...
is also an actor, and ultimately, like, the initial, she doesn't want to admit that she got fired is because he's pretty successful, and her friend Beth is pretty successful, and she's, like, barely scraping by, and maybe he had to pull some strings, like, use some of his connections to get her original role.
Right.
And obviously it's not a big deal, and obviously it's not like a close connection to where he would have heard back about her being fired.
Right.
But she doesn't want to admit that he used up maybe this favor or something only for her to mess it up. So, okay. I do kind of like that. And having said all of that, maybe this does just make a lot of sense, actually.
I mean, the thing is, the only other kind of conflict I can think of that doesn't involve Joel, because anything that involves Joel is just Joel knows about it, which is bad. The only other conflict I can think about that doesn't involve Joel is, like, something about her previous experience, like, They like her, and they're like, good thing you were never in this other show that was the one she got fired from. And she's like, haha, yeah. Or, good thing you were never, a chicken mascot, because that would be, that we can't hire someone who was a chicken mascot. And she's like, haha, yeah. So,
union rules. You cannot have been a mascot within the past 6 months.
But I don't think either of those are honestly as good as the Joel auditioning for the love interest, her love interest. So
no, and I think that makes a lot of sense, actually, because that's why they wouldn't in particular want to move away from LA, Because if he was just like in some other profession, they could just go somewhere else and he could find work and she could find work or whatever.
Right. Okay,
I
so
don't know.
now
That's not a big deal, but that's the way we go, I think.
So the plot arc is she's trying to... We have the chicken thing, we have this thing, and I feel like Beth should in some way be involved.
Yes, she should. I think she should be all along pressuring her to just come clean about this whole thing.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you think she should be threatening to reveal it all to Greg if Jolene doesn't. Should there be some kind of rising tension there?
I don't know. I don't think that seems like Beth's character. I think Beth is like a supportive friend and wouldn't do that. But
Okay.
I want Beth to at some point find out that Joel is falling in love with her in the chicken costume. And then Beth has the like, wait a minute. I have to tell them what's going on, but then doesn't get the chance before the actual climax happens.
Maybe Beth is showing up at the store at the exact same time as the final encounter with everybody.
Uh-huh.
Joins in the final number.
All right.
Beth bursts in like a quarter of the way in and she's like, guys, I've got to tell you something. And they're both like, yeah,
this is like halfway through the song when they've both already found out. So
she's like, I've got this huge revelation. And they're like, I mean... Here we are.
Okay. All right. So let's get into the details. So we open. So you said we open. All right. We open with an upbeat number of them laying out their plans. And we also have Beth in this number singing about how she thinks Jolene should tell Greg about the chicken costume.
Right. She's got to be this voice throughout of like, just come clean. Like, you know, nothing's wrong with this. Like, I know it's not what you wanted, but you've still got another chance later or whatever.
Right. Okay, so then what? What's the next plot beat after that? So Joel has to come back. The next plot beat is that Joel has to show up at the store for a third time, and this time he has no legitimate reason.
Right. So he's there. And she's got this,
Joel,
like...
I keep saying Joel. Greg has to show up at the store.
Maybe it would be easier if we just named every character Joel.
Yeah, I feel like that would be less easy.
Easier for speaking, but less easier for understanding.
Yes.
Luckily, we do most of the speaking, so, you know, we'll maybe consider it, but I kind of doubt it. Here's what I'm thinking. Is that, you know, like you said, we've just finished this number where Jolene has laid out this whole plan and she's like ready to put it into action. And Greg is coming and he's like being very blatant about this now. He's like, I came here for no other reason than to see the chicken girl and to be with the chicken girl. And I'm not ready to tell her that I am deeply in love with her yet. But
he's being very straightforward about this to the audience you're talking about.
I mean, like, he's clearly in the story. It's obvious that he's hitting on the chicken now.
Right. He comes back and he gives some very bad excuse about why he's there. He's like, "Oh, my flim-flams got gibbered. It's just nothing." Yeah.
So he's being pretty blatant about this now. You know, he's abandoning the some part of him probably feels like he needs some excuse for this because he's still probably a little conflicted at this point about, you know, cheating on Jolene in this kind of weird way, I guess. But point being, there's this is the first moment where he senses that there's a conflict in the relationship potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still like taking all of the signs the wrong way, but instead of a like, I definitely don't want to be with you, it's like maybe, you know, I don't know, try a bit harder, like, you know, gotta, you know, gotta earn
Right, like
the relationship.
When she like walks away to the other side of the storefront, his take on that is like, I need you to show that I'm worth it, right? Like you need to put in the effort to make this relationship make me can take you seriously.
Exactly. So he then is continuing to escalate throughout the act, and she's like desperately trying to, and that's where all the miscommunication comes. Is he's just taking all of this as signs like, I need to be more direct. I need to go, work harder at this, and she's like, just please go away.
Right. Okay. So scene wise, the first scene after the opening song of the act is this: Joel shows up, flimsy pretext. And he's clearly, just trying to spend time with her. And he's misinterpreting all of her signs, not as, I don't want to, not totally opposite, like, I'm in love with you. I honestly think that he's not interpreting the signs like that. He's interpreting them like, as profound things that she's saying. Not necessarily about him, just like something like she like accidentally hits him with the sign, or accidentally hits him with the sign, and he's like, I get what you're saying. You're saying we all push away the ones we love because we feel, we're afraid they won't love us back. I feel the exact same way, and that kind of makes him fall more and more in love with him. Or her,
she like
rather.
Walks away from him, and he's thinking like, we need to sometimes we need to distance ourselves from the things we want to realize how much we really care about them. And it's just all that nonsense in their interactions,
right.
And so you've got your scene of that, and that's all well and good. I think the next bit is so there's an option here that I don't think we've really considered yet, which is that Jolene tells Beth exactly what's going on rather than Beth discovering it. And so then the scene at the end would be Beth confronting them and making them deal with it with each other, as opposed to trying to tell them what's going on.
So in this scenario, Beth knows everything that's going on, and she has multiple times tried to get them to confront it, but something Deus Ex Machina has stopped them every single time.
It's getting comically more and more blatant, just
right until the very end, and she's like, nothing is stopping me. Jolene, Greg, this is what's going on. Anyway, so
she's built up this triumphant moment, and it's literally halfway through the final number where they're just like, we already know all this.
No, I think that could be it. Let me just tell me what you think of this. She is the one who introduces it, and as she's trying to get it started, literally more and more ridiculous things come in. A police officer comes in and it's like, there's a stampede of horses coming this way. She's like, get out of here, no. And somebody comes in and says there's a fire engulfing the entire city. That we're talking about this now. Stuff like that. She just keeps dismissing as she's trying to get them to talk about it.
Yeah. A bus full of orphans just crashed. We need somebody to
and they need your help.
They need your help. Screw the orphans. Get out of here.
Screw the orphans. This is more important.
All right. I do like that.
Okay, so scene after... Okay, so in that case, we need to accelerate things a little bit. So, in terms of Beth finding out about Joel. So the next scene after Joel and... After Greg and Jolene is Jolene talking to Beth and being like, Greg is acting super weird,
right.
And I don't know what to do. I need to get out of this job as soon as possible. And Beth is like, I found another audition for you. It's this date and time. She's like, oh my gosh, that's so great. Thank you so much.
Right.
And then Beth leaves. Okay, so we need to figure out how... Jolene leaves. We need to figure out how Beth finds out about Greg's feelings. Because I feel like I would like her to hear it directly from him.
Right.
But it doesn't, as we discussed last time, it doesn't really make sense for her to just ask him.
Right. So here's a thought. Throughout the act, we kind of get there's maybe 2 or 3 encounters between Jolene and Greg that more or less go the way we just described, right? And after each one, Joel has like a 30-second solo bit about how the relationship is progressing, and it's from his perspective, it's just getting more and more intense every time. And like after the last one, kind of like right before the build up to the end, you get like him doing his bit like basically straight to camera, right?
To the audience.
To the audience. And so he's doing that, and he is like going off stage, right? Kind of continuing the end of his song, just like kind of, fading out or whatever. And at that point you realize that Beth has like been right there in the background all along, like she
right
puts down a book or something, from in front of her face or whatever, and
she's
it's just like what?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Wait a minute.
Okay, so that's how she finds out. Okay, so scene 1, that interaction, he sings about it. Beth is not there. Scene 2, Beth talks about this. She gives her the audition. Scene 3.
Right.
What's scene 3?
Scene 3 has got to be, I want to say, like, around this point, we probably do want a bit of suspense about whether the audition is going to go well or not.
Right, so...
Right? Even though we know that there's, like, a further conflict later. She's got to be...
Go ahead.
I feel like she's got to be going, like, sort of head-to-head with someone here. In a kind of, like, an audition setting that turns into, like...
Right, okay, so this scene is the audition, right? So she shows... What?
I was just kind of continuing that thought in my head of, like, basically it starts off as a normal audition, but then they start to like they're saying the lines or whatever, and then they start to like focus on each other, and it kind of degenerates into some sort of like rap battle.
You've heard of cabinet meetings as rap battles. Now get ready for auditions as rap battles. Okay, so this scene is the audition. So she shows up, and she sees her arch nemesis.
Yeah.
Whose name is...
Oh, man. Is this the... What's some context here? Is this the same person that took her role in the other show? Well, like, what's the...
Presumably no, because then she wouldn't be at this audition. She would be in the other show. So context is, this woman is at every audition that Jolene is at, and she's very talented, but a huge bitch, and so of course they have this big rivalry because, they're often going for the same part. So. But
wouldn't this... I don't know. I feel like if this person was like her rival and like beating her out at these things, that she would have one of those other parts, right? Is this like some kind of long-standing thing?
Yeah, I mean, they're both actresses. So the thing is, it's not like Jolene gets half the parts and this other person gets half the parts, because they're never the only two people auditioning for the part. So
yeah.
It's just that they happen to always see each other and strongly dislike each other. So
okay.
As far as we know, the only parts that we know for sure that Beth has been auditioning at, or that we know that Beth got the part that she had in the beginning.
Right.
And I guess we never really saw this girl before, but it probably would have been good to see her at some of the other auditions.
Yeah, that's kind of... I guess that's what I was getting at, is how do we how do we build up to that moment of them being
I mean,
together?
the thing is, we kind of montaged away most of those other auditions in a
Yeah.
song.
So maybe this isn't like an existing thing. Maybe this is kind of a new, like you sense kind of a rivalry type thing, but it's not like coming from anywhere other than they're both up for this part right now. And it's Jolene versus Karen.
Okay, I can roll with that. So Jolene shows up for this audition, and you see, right, it has to somehow devolve into these two people going against each other. So how can that happen?
Yeah, so there's like 8 of them together. They bring them up in, let's say they bring them up in groups at first to kind of run through some things, and like Karen and Jolene are in the same initial group, and so the casting director or whatever who's kind of running this audition is like, all right, the 8 of you have done your thing. Now I want to see you and you and you and you. And, everyone else gets dismissed, and then they have to run this kind of paired up thing where the other 2 do their thing, and so you kind of see what it's supposed to be like. And then Jolene and Karen do their thing, and it starts out like, get the sense of rivalry, and then it really gets off the rails.
Even better, actually, would be that the pair. By the way, you're not recording on that microphone, right?
No, I'm not. I'm just playing with it.
Anyway, right. So even better is the 2 parts that they're reading are rivals in the show.
Yeah.
So
and they like go off script in a genuine rivalry, and the casting director is like, brilliant. I want to see you two at the callback.
Right. And also during this scene, first of all, I think that most of this should be a song. And you can easily see people being eliminated throughout the song until it's just these 2 people.
Right.
And we also want to mention the male guy that in the end people will find out Joel is auditioning for. So I guess we don't really need a character name for the play within our movie.
Obviously it would exist, but we don't need to specify what it is here.
Right. So okay, but it's clear from these 2 girls talking in this scene that they're talking about this guy.
Right.
So that's in the back of everyone's mind, or maybe it's not, but people will recognize it once Joel brings it up later. Oh fuck, Greg brings it up later.
Yeah. So there's essentially some reference to the guy, and in the next scene after she knows she's invited to the callback, she's talking to Greg.
Right.
And Greg is like, I've got, maybe he's like, I know things have been a little bit weird, but I've got great news. Like, I'm up for this part of the guy. And she's like, oh, that's great.
Right. So, okay. So, yeah. So this is the scene following. This is scene 4 of Act 2. It's them at home, Jolene and Greg, talking. Right. And, it's just kind of starts off with Greg being like, oh, how's your play going? Oh, so good. So good. I can't wait for you to see it. And then him being like, yeah, that's awesome. And by the way, I'm up for, and she's kind of like, oh, so what have you been up to lately? Because of course she knows what he's been up to lately. Right, and he's like, not much, but good news is I have an audition for X role. No, he's like, I got a call back for X role. Right. and the callbacks are next Tuesday. And she's like, wait, that's when my callbacks are, and this is the exact role that I'm going to be reading with. And she's like, oh, and so then she's like, oh, crap. And she's like, and so that's that scene. Then the next scene is another chicken suit scene. I don't really know if we need to go into much detail about this scene.
No, except for the fact that this isn't like the final one. It's just another one.
Right. I was thinking that I know your original intent was for what's her face for Beth to discover in the final one, but I think she should discover it here in the second one.
Okay.
Because we want to establish that she has a number of attempts to get them to talk about this before the final one,
right.
Leading up to the final one.
That's a good idea. So that's going on here in the second one, and that kind of differentiates it from the first and the last, so that it's not just, pointless repetition. She's desperately trying to reveal it, and maybe Jolene is even like sabotaging the attempts somehow too.
Right. So I feel like the scene after this is Joel. Right. So I want literally the next scene to be Jolene, Beth, and Greg at lunch, and Beth is trying to ask extremely leading questions to try and get them to talk about what's going on.
Right.
And it's clearly not working because they're just lying. And then eventually Beth gives up and it's like, okay, listen guys, here's what's going on. And right as she's about to say it, something happens. What happens?
All right, right at that, so they're at lunch right then, right? So like right at that moment, Joel gets a call and like has to rush out because I don't know. I feel like
no. Here's what it is. We retcon the last scene a bit so that it's not the scene where Joel tells her he got the call back. This is where Joel finds out he got the call back. He
gets the call back at that moment.
Right, he comes back and he's like, guys, great news, I got a call back for this show. And of course, Beth and Jolene both know that that's the show that she's auditioning for.
And so Beth at that point is like, this is literally the perfect, I'm not going to tee it up for you any better than this. And she's like, that's awesome. Jolene really likes that show, don't you, Jolene?
And then she's just like, I gotta go. And then she runs away.
Right. And Greg is like, well, it's been cool hanging out with you, Beth. See you later.
Right. Well, I feel like
so they don't have a chance to like talk together, you know?
I feel like the thing is Beth is like enough of a bro or whatever the female equivalent is that she's not
probably
going...
still a bro, right?
I guess. That
if you're
she's not
female, please email us about whether or not you would still consider yourself a bro in this situation.
She's enough of a bro that she wouldn't like reveal to Greg what's going on without, Jolene saying it's okay, even though she's trying to get them she's trying to get them to talk about it.
Exactly, yeah.
So we go from Jolene leaving abruptly, and we get into a solo where Jolene's now like, what do I do now? Because my only chance of getting out of this chicken job, and Joel's gonna be there.
Right. Like this is like the low point of the whole show. This
is a disaster. And then Beth comes in the middle of the song, and they kind of duet, and Beth's like, you have to tell him,
Yeah,
there's no other way out. There's only one option. And she's just like, I can't do it. And then, so, we cut to chicken scene number 3.
Right.
And
the final chicken scene.
At this point, Jolene is desperate to get Joel away. Fuck, Greg away. Jolene,
Jolene right before.
At this point, she's like, using like a fake voice to try and talk to Greg.
Right.
Like she's
and
talking.
He's like, finally, you've opened up to me. This.
She's
is
talking
the
in a really high pitched voice like this.
Yeah.
She's like,
and
oh, Greg, I have a boyfriend. I can't be talking to you. And he's like, you know what? Our love extends beyond blah 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 blah. So
right.
Anyway, hijinks.
We were meant to be together.
Misconceptions. And
so at some point, he needs to. All right. Here's how we tie that into the end scene that we talked about before.
Uh-huh.
She, like, pretty bluntly turns him down. And for a second, he's like, oh, okay, I see. Maybe I was misinterpreting this. And he, like, turns to leave. And she's like, all right, this is my chance. I've just got to get out of here. I've got to, She comes to the realization at that point, like, fine, I will take the call back, try and get the role with Joel. That's what we need right now. And so she's turning in her chicken suit to Snowy Woodson, and Greg is outside going like, man, I can't believe I misunderstood this whole time. Or, wait a minute, maybe that was just her finally, building up the courage to confess her love, something just colossally stupid. And so that's when he bursts back in and he's like, I understand it now, let's, and realizes that it was Jolene. And so that's when we start the final moment.
I feel like every single plot thread has led us up to this correctly so, but I'm sad that I don't think we can do the Jolene thing where she's increasingly ignoring, or not Jolene, Beth things where she's increasingly ignoring interruptions to try to get them to talk about it. But I think this is the correct thing to do. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think she could still definitely do that, but it's ultimately meaningless because they've already talked about it.
Right. So let me make one modification. Instead of this just going straight into it, she rejects him and says something like, the circumstances aren't right, or you know what I mean, maybe in another life. And he says, all right, whatever, see ya, I'm sad. And so then
very emotional response.
And so now Jolene comes to the realization that she has to tell Greg about this, and she has to take that call back. This is and then we have one more attempt by Beth to get them to talk about it, which is interrupted by something even more absurd than the last time, like a marching band is coming down the street as she's
literally
about to
marching between them.
The thing is, right, so now and okay, here's what it is. Let me lay it out.
All right.
Jolene and Greg duet separate locations, right? So they're not actually singing to each other or next to each other physically. It's one of those where they're like in different places. They're duetting, and they've both, and Jolene is basically saying, this is it. I have to tell him. I have to do this. I have to come clean. I have to do this callback. And Greg is saying, this is it. She said in another life, but this is it. This is the only life I have. I can't give up on this. This is what I'm meant to be with her.
I know what we have.
So we go to the next scene. Them two eating with Beth again, and now they've both decided to, because he's now decided, I have to break up with my girlfriend so I can be with this chicken costume girl.
Yeah.
And so they've both basically decided to talk, and Beth is trying to get them to talk, but circumstances will not allow it, right?
Yeah.
something keeps happening, and finally, Beth has to go to work. Not Beth. Jolene has to go to work. She's
Jolene.
like, right. Jolene has to go to work. She's like, all right, I would love to. I wish we could continue this conversation, but let's do it later. It's really important. But I have to go. I have to go to work. So she leaves, and then we have this scene you talked about. Greg shows up to confess his undying love. She is quitting her job, turning in the chicken head.
Yeah.
So he comes in, and her back is to him. So he sings his song about how he can't give up on her, blah blah blah. And she turns around and is like, and I don't know. I feel like she can't be pissed at him here. I feel like the emotion of this scene requires her to sing back her love, but be like, I can't hide my secret anymore. This is who I am. I'm this chicken lady. And they have an emotional makeup. But the problem is it doesn't make sense for her to...
be okay with that having
Right,
happened.
it doesn't make sense for her to be okay with that, and also for her to, like I feel like we needed more of her liking Joel. Greg. We needed more of that for her to be feeling this way.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we just make it make no sense. What do you think?
Here's what we're going to do. Everything that we've said up until this point is going to happen very similarly to like we said it, but Jolene is going to like Greg more in every, bit of it. So that by the time we get here, it makes sense for her to not be only angry about the, effective breakup for the chicken, but then the chicken is her, so it's fine. Oh no, connection lost. This has never happened during the episode before.
Because I cannot hear Nathan anymore.
Let's see. I don't know what we're going to do about this. We're probably just going to cut it out.
Okay, I can hear you again.
Alright, there we go. That was not that long. Maybe we won't have to cut it out. What was the last thing you heard?
Everything happened similarly, except that she likes him a little bit more every time, so that it makes sense for her to not only be angry. That's it.
Yeah, that's pretty much all the meaningful stuff I said then, and then the connection broke.
Right.
I think the point I'm getting at is we kind of just should wrap this up here, and this is where we are, and this is the rest of it. I agree. Should just kind of have made sense to make it get here.
It's a cop out, but we don't really have time to fix it. So
right. Obviously, in the full adaptation, it will have been done right from the beginning. So.
Exactly. So, but anyway, so he confesses her love. She turns around. She says she's in love with him, and they make up. They make out. And then Beth comes in, guys, busload of children, fire, whatever. And then she's like, you have to talk about this now. And they say, it's already done.
It's over.
Roll credits. All right.
And then the credits scene is obviously the two of them doing their callback together.
And totally bombing. They get the director's just like, that was, without a doubt, the worst performance I have seen in my life. Get the fuck out of this auditorium right now. And then they're both. And then you see them. They're both the chicken mascots.
Yes. Oh, it's perfect.
Okay, we need a chicken-related pun for the name of this musical.
All right. It's got to be the pun of it needs to be the word luck has been replaced by cluck.
Okay, as Cluck would have it.
All right, that works for me.
Coming in theaters, probably never, but if you're a movie producer, email us about the rights, because we're certainly willing to sell.
Right. You can pay us in GameStop stock.
Yeah. Hopefully in the next few days, because in
as long as it hasn't crashed, absolutely cratered by then. I mean, probably right. Even still,
probably that would be the ideal time to get it. So
yeah.
All right. I think that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening, everybody. Tune in next week, because I think we'll be playing Joel the Game for the first time since we revamped the rules.
Ooh, yeah, that'll be exciting.
So tune in to hear that. Let us know your thoughts about this musical, sports, our sketch, pretty much our 2-year anniversary, 2-year anniversary.
Our future 10-year anniversary.
Yeah, or really anything.
Man,
you want to email us
about. We'll be like in our 30s. Is that true? Yeah, that's definitely true. That's obviously true.
You weren't sure in 10 years if you would be in your 30s.
I just had to make sure that we haven't been podcasting for so long that I was less than 20 when we started, but that's not the case. So.
Right. All right. Like I said, send us an email. I'm Alex.
Yep, I'm Alex.
And this has been Joel.